I've got my little friend here with me today, and hopefully you know exactly what this is. If you don't, you should definitely stop this and go watch Alien, Aliens, and Alien 3. And then, after you watch this, you can watch Prometheus, which we will be talking about today, and Alien Covenant, just like on my shirt. Look at that. I got the crew member shirt. Fun fact, I actually won this and this shirt in a sweepstakes. I love free stuff. So today, in honor of the brand new movie, Alien Romulus, coming out, I'm going to be talking about Prometheus and Alien Covenant because those ones happened before this new movie that's coming out. And both of them were done by Ridley Scott, who made the original Alien movie. Now, what's really fun about Prometheus and Alien Covenant is they actually predate Alien. How cool is that? We actually find out exactly how these were made and where these came from. So Prometheus starts with the main character, Shaw, who is a female scientist. And let me just say, I absolutely love that all of the Alien movies have a strong female lead. There has been so much talk about weak women in movies and they're always the victims, blah, blah, blah. But I grew up on Alien and a strong female lead. So I think those women that think all women are victims in movies aren't watching the right movies. That's just my opinion. So we start out with Shaw. Her and her boyfriend or partner or whatever, Holloway, have found these cave drawings that seem to be all of the same galaxy system, and there's one planet on that system that can contain life. So they think their makers, the human makers, came from there. So they go to the Weyland Corporation. That's a callback to the first Aliens movies. Actually, all the Alien movies have to deal with the Weyland Corporation. So they go to them, and the Weyland Corp funds the trip to this planet. On the way to the planet, we meet David, who is the android in this movie. We see that David really likes to experiment with things. He likes to learn things. He seems to be his own person, almost like he's a real person. So that is very different than a tool that an android should be, right? As they're arriving on this planet, they see a landing strip that goes to a facility. So that's where they decide to park the Prometheus, which is the name of the ship. All the scientists, well, most of the scientists, decide to go in and check this thing out. And what they find is that there has been terraforming going on, making its own oxygen. The outside of the building is not breathable, but inside, it's a perfect oxygen ratio. Now, I don't know about you, but if I didn't know what bacteria was on that planet, I wouldn't take my helmet off. But they do, which is okay at first. What they find is a very chaotic scene. There's clearly something that happened a long time ago. There are bodies lined up, and there's this holograph thing that comes up, and they see them running from something. We never know exactly what they ran from, what this chaotic scene was, but it's clear that they were trying to evacuate, and they weren't able to. And this is what's fun about this movie to me. It's the callback to the original Alien movie. When they first got onto that planet, you see the big creature in the chair with the gun. I'll pop a picture of it up here. Very clear, obvious head that you wouldn't forget. That's what those creatures look like. How cool is that? Now, something that they do run across, and that comes up and is very important in this movie, are the big jars. They seem to be all black and solid at first, but as they're hanging out in this room, these things start to melt. And it's just this black liquid, kind of like oil. But something starts to happen. There's this big storm going on, and two of the scientists get left inside the building while the rest of them go back into the ship. And David brought one of the jars back onto the ship, and he is starting to test it. And the way that he tests it is he gives a little bit of this black liquid into the drink of Holloway, which is Shaw's boyfriend. What we find out about this black liquid stuff is that it deconstructs the DNA, completely demolishes it, and turns it into something new. That is the theme of these movies. In order to create new life, you have to destroy. So David is doing that. Now, the one thing you should know about David is that he doesn't like his makers. So all these humans, including Weyland, who is super old in this movie, are trying to meet their makers, trying to meet the people or things who created human life. David knows who created him And he is so disappointed in Wayland. He thinks that Wayland is not worthy of having made such a wonderful creation. He's pretty pompous. So he doesn't care what happens to the humans. He just wants to create something perfect. So Holloway gets this dose, and him and Shaw, do their thing that evening. And then when they go back into the building the next day, things are starting to go bad. David has found a big stockpile of these black jars. He's also found the control ship, and it seems like that ship, which was carrying these bioweapons, basically, back to Earth. So what were these creatures doing with a course to Earth with a huge thing of bioweapons? As you can imagine, they were trying to destroy Earth. When Shaw finds this out, she's upset. Why do our makers want to destroy us, right? All heck is kind of breaking loose at this point because the two people that were originally left in the building or the ship, we find out, they had come across this snake type thing. Things are going bad with Holloway because he got just a tiny bit of that black stuff in him and he's kind of sick. All his veins are turning black and he's not looking good. And one of the things that happens that always makes me laugh in every sci-fi horror movie, there's one person who doesn't want to let the sick person back on the ship. If I was in charge, I would not let a sick person with some alien disease back on the ship. Who would do that, right? But they're always the bad guy when they're like, oh no, you are not bringing that person on this ship when they're sick with some alien disease, because it can make everyone sick. Of course, the bad person is Wayland's daughter, we find out, and she has to blowtorch Holloway. It's just this big chaotic scene that happens, and David is kind of just sitting back watching everything happen with interest. He's playing along like he's being that helpful droid, and he's really helping the humans, but he's got his own agenda for sure. So during this chaotic scene, Shaw is having some abdominal pain. So David does an exam through there's this big medical machine that can scan every part of the body. And they find out that she's actually pregnant, but she's 3 months pregnant. They've only been here for a couple days and they were in hypersleep for 2 years before that. So how is she pregnant by 3 months? Well, it's because her and Holloway did the thing after he got that black stuff in his system. So some weird things happen with that. The thing is growing really fast and she actually has to use this medical tube to take it out. And what we find is nothing like this. These creatures in this movie aren't quite the same as the Aliens movie because they haven't been created yet. That's what's fun about the Alien Covenant in the next movie. What comes out of her is kind of like this squid type thing, and that ends up getting really big. What we find out is that the creature's face that we saw from the first Alien movie, that's actually a mask. And these creatures actually look more like humans, and in fact, they have human DNA. So we did, in fact, come from these creatures. Now, these guys are very big, they're very muscular, they're much bigger than humans. They made humans, and then they wanted to destroy the human race. So, of course, Shaw is not going to let this happen. She crashes into this ship that was trying to leave. Obviously, I'm leaving out quite a bit of what happens, but I'm trying to give you the abridged version because it's a very long, very detailed movie. The main thing is that David and Shaw escape from the planet on the ship that we saw in Alien. It's that big kind of horseshoe-looking ship, and that was exactly what it looked like in the original Alien movie. So that is really cool, and then it starts with Alien Covenant. So Alien Covenant starts with a whole new set of crew members, but they have their own version of the android, and he is the same actor that plays David. It's Michael Fassbender, and he plays an android named Walter. Now, I do have to say, Michael Fassbender is an incredible actor. His range and all the languages that he speaks well is very impressive. And the Walter android in this movie is very, very different than David. David is all about creating and being artistic and drawing and learning music and listening to opera and poetry and all that stuff. But Walter is just a tool. He is there to help the crew. Now, the point of this crew is to colonize another planet. So they have, I don't remember the exact number, but they have a bunch of colonists on the ship that they're on. Now something happens, there's some big light thing that happens and the ship stops and all the crew members come out of hypersleep. And what they find when they're there in this part of space is a message that comes from a planet they hadn't seen before. And they decide that instead of going to the original planet that they had mapped out for decades to send the colonists, they were actually going to check this planet out. Not a good idea in my opinion, but that's the decision they make. They land on this planet, and right away they notice that there's wheat growing, which is a human crop. And as they're walking along, trying to scope out the place, there's these little mushroom things, and they're releasing these spores, which the people don't notice. And what's fun about this is that those spores look like the black liquid that came from the first movie. Now, two of the guys that are looking around get this black little specks in this movie. They're like specks. They go into his ear or his nose. Well, one of the things that they find is the ship that Shaw and David were on. So we already know that David and Shaw are here. These two guys that got the black stuff inside of them, they go downhill fast. And these little creatures that are very similar to the xenomorphs that we know and love come out of them. One of them is a backbuster, which is so cool. And the other one is a mouth buster, and it just comes directly out of his mouth, and they grow very quickly. And these people are being taken over by these almost xenomorphs. I mean, I guess they're all xenomorphs anyways, but the xenomorph that I know and love is the original one. What happens is David actually rescues them from this situation, and they all go through a courtyard with a bunch of charred bodies, like thousands of charred bodies. And they go into this temple. Now, David tells them that when they got to this planet, him and Shaw, he accidentally released those black jars and accidentally killed the entire planet. And that Shaw accidentally died in the crash. But we find out later, that's not really what happened. In fact, what really happened is that David purposefully released this entire bioweapon store onto these people and got rid of all of the makers of the human race. He just eliminated all of them. And then we find out later that he actually used Shaw to start experimenting on making the perfect creature, what he thinks is the perfect creature. So what we find out through Alien Covenant is that David is responsible for creating the xenomorphs that we know and love, which is wild. He had been spending 10 years making these. He'd been experimenting, he'd been using some of the animals and Shaw to create the perfect being, which is the xenomorph, and he created the first eggs, which is very interesting. He ends up bringing one of the crew members to meet these eggs. He tells them, oh, they're safe. They're perfectly safe. But then this little guy, the face hugger, pops out. And after a few minutes in the movie, we find the first chestbuster, which is the first xenomorph. The very first xenomorph that we know and love is born in this movie. And of course, all heck is breaking loose because the crew members are getting their first taste of these crazy creatures. And they know something is not right with David. They can tell he's a weird guy. You can tell in this movie that he cares for these creatures. And even though these creatures are destroying the crew members, he's kind of on their side. And they can tell. Now, him and Walter kind of get into it a little bit. Walter tells him, oh, well, my version of you has been upgraded to not have so many dreams and ambitions. He's basically a tool. Now, David finds this to be just a travesty because how could you not have your own dreams? And they get into it. Now, what we find is that David had kind of styled his hair and his look to look like Walter so that he is not as threatening to the crew members. So they get in a big fight, and we don't find out who wins until the end. So they're battling the xenomorph through the end of the movie. They had finally found out that David had caused the destruction of these people. They finally found out that David had been experimenting on Shaw to create these creatures. And the main character in this movie is being put back into hypersleep so they can go to the original planet with all the colonists on it. And she is saying to Walter, "Oh, will you help me build the cabin on the lake like we had talked about before?" And it's very clear that he has no idea what she's talking about. And she realizes as she is falling into hypersleep that it's not Walter who was there on the ship with all the colonists, but David. And that's how she falls asleep. And the movie ends with David putting 2 baby face huggers into the cryo things with all the embryos for all the colonists. And that's how that movie ends. Oh my gosh, you guys. I hope I explained it well enough, because there was so much happening in between everything that I didn't touch on, that I didn't talk about, because the main thing that I want you to take out of this is that David created the xenomorphs. It is he that is responsible for it. So Wayland made David, and David made the xenomorphs and destroyed all of the things, the creatures, the humans, I guess, that made human life. And now he made the creatures that are going to destroy more human life. That is the basic premise. You gotta watch these movies. I don't explain them well. I don't know why you keep watching these. I am not good at explaining movies that I'm excited about, especially. But I hope you got something fun out of it. I hope you do enjoy these movies. And I am going to be doing a movie review on the brand new Aliens movie when it comes out. I hope you look forward to that.